9:04 Pacific time. Looks like we got a good crowd here, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started if we can. Just a quick welcome and housekeeping. Again, welcome to everybody. This is the Cook Solutions Group and Advanced Fraud Solutions Conveyance webinar. We're excited to officially be partnered with Advanced Fraud Solutions, and we're excited to have them on the phone with us today as well. Like I said, we want this to be as interactive as possible, so feel free to come off mute if you'd like to. If you have questions, more than welcome to do that. We also have the Q&A in the top, as well as the chat there. So if you'd like to submit any questions, we'll be moderating that throughout the webinar today as well, and do our best to get to all the questions that we have, basically depending on how the time goes too. So I'm going to kind of kick it off and just kind of give you, for those that are not familiar with either Cook Solutions Group or Conveyance and Advanced Fraud Solutions, we'll kind of talk through kind of why and what has led us to today's conversation. And then from there, we'll pass it over to Tony and the team to kind of talk through the solution. We'll hopefully get to a spot where we can demo it and kind of show you the integration and how that looks. And then really, hopefully, get to any questions you guys have, and hopefully have it be able to end on time. So when CSG started with Conveyance, which was, gosh, now probably 7 years ago, believe it or not, the vision at the time was to help modernize check imaging, which kind of sounds sometimes counterintuitive, like checks are not necessarily modern. However, the way processing checks has been done for so long, the infrastructure, the architecture, none of it seemed to really match kind of what we were hoping for as a Cook Solutions Group with a modern disruptive technology, right? A lot of it was on-premise servers, a lot of it was archaic UIs, a lot of it was point-to-point connections, integrations were difficult. So we set out to develop a truly cloud-native solution that didn't require a server, that allows us to integrate in the cloud with companies like AFS on a more seamless, easier way than having to do complex, expensive integrations. And so over the years, we've been able to accomplish this, and we're pretty proud of what Conveyance is today. And it's led us to where we're at now with what we want to talk about today, with the integration with Advanced Fraud Solutions. And so we're excited to show you what we've been working on. I hope that this is going to be right up your wheelhouse. Obviously, fraud is a massive concern in all sectors that we do within banking, but check fraud and deposit fraud is always on the rise, and it's always there. And so anything we can do to help mitigate that and give you the tools to be more successful when it comes to stopping this, we're all about it, right? So with that said, I'm going to pass the time over to Tony with Advanced Fraud Solutions. He's going to kind of show you what we've been cooking, for lack of better words, and we'll go from there. Tony?
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate the introduction. Appreciate all of you joining us today. If you're not familiar with who I am, or if you're not familiar with Advanced Fraud Solutions, my name is Tony Woodall. I'm partner relationship manager for Advanced Fraud Solutions. Been with the company for about 2.5 years now. That's what I look like in a suit, in case you were curious. But I work with great partners like Cook that we have. Again, just trying to mitigate fraud, catch it really before it hits the bottom line. That's really what we're about. If you're not familiar with Advanced Fraud Solutions, I'll just walk you through kind of the origin story of our company. We started back in 2007 trying to solve for institutions on one side of town being hit by fraud, that financial institutions, other branches on the other side of town getting hit by the same fraud. They wanted to come together and figure out a way to solve for that. So they did it through a consortium database, being able to share those returned items and catch that repeat fraud as it continued to proliferate throughout the area. So that was 2007 where we started. We flash forward to today. We have somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,300, 1,400 clients, a lot of them direct, a lot of them through partnerships like with Cook. We continue to grow very quickly. We've been on the Inc. 5000 list 8 times now, and we continue to be a leader within the fraud industry. Our suite of products, TrueChecks is mainly what we're going to talk about today. As Scott mentioned, it's amazing that we're in 2026 and we're talking about AI and we're talking about all these advanced things that we have in technology, and we still got a problem with check fraud. And I'm afraid to say that in 2027 and in 2028 and 29 and 30, we're still going to be talking about checks. And because we know that's the case, we're going to come up with, the best solutions we can to try to, prevent as much of the fraud as we can. We also have solutions, dealing with other fraud, because as you stop it in one area, it tends to migrate to other areas. It doesn't tend to actually go away. It just moves. So there's ACH Solutions, Wire, as a positive pay product, and then we have some other things in development as well. So check fraud, again, 2026, we're still talking about checks. And it's getting worse. We have more technology, more eyes on it, more solutions in place, but the problem continues to grow. So if you look at the stats, you can track it back, the last several years, and it's doubled really in the last 4. It's to the point where these suspicious activity reports now, it's about 20% of them are related to check fraud. And we also work with some other some other companies that do dark web monitoring, and some of the things that they have to tell you is terrifying. Just the amount of checks that end up being listed, these stolen checks that end up being listed on the dark web it's staggering. The numbers vary depending on which study you look at, who you ask, but it's generally estimated to be somewhere in the $40 billion, tremendous amount, and it continues to grow. And this is a problem that is not unique to a specific state, specific region. It's all over in different capacities, some higher, some lower. What you're looking at here on this graphic of the US is going back to September of 2024 and running through August of 2025. So around a year of data from that period. And this is check fraud reports per 100,000 residents in the state. So obviously less population, that's going to affect, how this number shows up. But I want to call out to you there, the one that's kind of highlighted towards the bottom, Delaware, 1,793 per 100,000 residents. Just tremendous amount of check fraud being reported in Delaware. Some other states, that you see it, very high based on, population. South Dakota, they're in the middle, 852, pretty significant. A lot of the Southeast, has a big deal with it in terms of, the amount of the population versus the amount of check reports. So just something to be aware of. I'm sure we have folks represented on the call that are from a lot of different states, but just you can see kind of where it's hitting the most. I thought this was an interesting graphic. Some quotes that I gathered from different industry benchmarks and studies that are out there. One, there's a Jack Henry benchmark they put together that was saying U.S. banks and credit unions, consider check fraud as a major concern. This was in 2025. This was captured. So that's not surprising that 3/4 of them are still worried about that. The AFP survey, Payments Fraud and Control Survey, had 63% facing check fraud in 2025, which that number is, even though check fraud is still proliferating, there was less institutions saying they faced it. I think that number was like 66% in 2024. So slight improvement, either that or maybe less people responded. I don't know. It's hard for me to believe it actually got better with all the numbers that we see. But anyway, there's financial institutions listed as a concern from the Data Advisor survey, 80%. I would be curious, actually, maybe if you want to throw it in the chat, what is the payment type, the fraud type that the folks on the session here are most concerned about? Is it check fraud? Is it wire? What are you seeing the most? I'd be curious to get the audience's input on that. 91% saw an increase or had the same amount of fraud in 2025. So again, it's staying pretty consistent across the board. I wanted to share this. I think this is a pretty powerful piece to look at when you think about fraud, because there's a lot of costs with fraud that kind of sit behind the scenes. You can look at the face value of the actual fraud. Say a fraudulent item of $10,000 goes through. There's more costs than just that $10,000. LexisNexis puts together this great study. I've been tracking it for the last few years now, where they're trying to calculate the true cost of fraud. And there's a number of different metrics that they apply to this. It has to do with expenses to track down the fraud, the labor that it costs, the investigative costs, the transaction reversals, fines, and other fees that may be associated, reputational hit, all these other factors that can play into what it actually costs an organization. So if you think about all those factors and we go to 2019, every dollar of fraud in 2019, based on their analysis, equaled $3.25 of actual cost to the financial institution. So triple what the actual face value of the fraud. And that's a lot. But the problem is, as you can imagine, with inflation and other things, it gets worse. So if we look at 2020, $3.73. 2021, that actually should, that should be $4.25, I believe there. Sorry about that. So as it climbs up through, you see a slow increase to the cost. And then as we got to 2024, $4.67, and I was hoping we would see that improve, but no, it gets worse. Unfortunately, I think with some of the inflationary costs and things that occurred in 2025, it was the biggest jump yet, moving to almost $6. $6 of cost, $5.75 of cost per dollar of fraud. So almost a 6x. So when you think about that $10,000 fraud hit, you're approaching $60,000 in terms of actual cost. I think these are things you need to consider when you're trying to figure out budget and ROI and, hey, can we afford a fraud solution? You know, it's gotten to the point now where it's really more of you can't afford not to have some sort of fraud solution because the cost is just staggering. It's to the point that in 2025, 31% of institutions reported losing more than $1 million in direct fraud losses. And if you look at it a little bit further, if you want to go to 5 million, that still affected nearly 1 in 5 institutions. So 22, or a little bit over 1 in 5, 22% of institutions reported more than a $5 million fraud loss. And 60% said they had an increase in fraud in 2025. And it's the same methods. These are the things that are not really changing. It's check washing, it's stealing checks, it's doing duplicate deposits. Like I mentioned at the start, companies started with duplicate deposits. People are trying to deposit on one side of town and do it again on the other. It's counterfeit checks. You know, what can we change on the check to, get it past the tellers? If you're just relying on, the tellers to be able to catch it, they're going to catch it. There's some certainly great tellers out there. They're going to catch some of it, but they're not going to catch everything. And the criminals are getting very, very smart in how they do these things. And obviously with that, you have teller turnover, you might have well-trained staff, but then somebody leaves or something happens and you have to bring in new people, train them up. Some things maybe get missed there. A lot of institutions deal with legacy systems. And if you're relying on Reg CC funds, that becomes a problem. There's always a delay in terms of the federal response. So you really want as close to a real-time type of solution as you can get. So what we're doing with TrueChecks is, again, it's that consortium-powered model. We have a very large database made up of return files that we capture every single day from our direct customers and from different partners that we work with. And we've been doing it for 18 years now. There's millions and millions of data points in there, like I said, growing daily. And that database is essentially what's going to feed into Conveyance that Barry's going to talk about here in just a second. And it's deployable frontline or backline, foolproof, easy to use. It's going to give you that recommended action. We're going to tell you, what data we have on a check, whether it be foreclosed accounts or duplicate accounts. If it's a counterfeit item, non-sufficient funds. Those are just a few of the items. There's a lot of more things that we're looking for. But the idea being that we're going to prevent clearing those fraudulent items in the first place. You're going to maintain the account holder trust. Again, we know that, like I said on that previous piece, that those costs go well beyond what the fraud cost itself was, those reputational hits and other things that can affect an institution, trying to avoid those and ultimately, of course, reduce losses and make things more efficient with the institution. So with that, we'll throw it over to you, Barry, to go into Conveyance and how this ties into what we're talking about here.
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you, Tony. Let me take the screen share from you. Hope that looks good for everyone. Okay. So getting into the Conveyance piece, let me just skip ahead on a couple of these here. Okay. So like Scott mentioned previously, Conveyance has been around for a little over 7 years now. So Conveyance is the first true cloud check imaging service. So what that means is for you all, the financial institutions, that means that you don't have any extra hardware that you have to buy. You don't have to maintain that extra hardware. There's not an extra server that you've got to stand up in your data center and then maintain it and pay for it, things like that. We take care of all of that for you. So this cloud service, not only does it have the ability to offload that responsibility, but it'll just automatically work and will, as part of our deployment projects, will model conveyance or configure conveyance to work in the most efficient manner for your financial institution. We work with you, your vendors, and other, like your item processor, for example, and we make sure that we've got conveyance nailed for your exact financial institution needs. So conveyance has the ability to create customized X9 files. That means like cash letter files. Of course, there are some FIs that don't use cash letter files, so we have also some ways to support their needs. But the idea here is that we have this cloud service now that was completely built, owned and operated from scratch by CSG, so that we get to handle that part of your business and support your needs from beginning to end there. So the biggest piece with conveyance is that cloud hosting service. So that's like the backbone of what conveyance is. But getting into some of the nitty gritty and exciting pieces about it, we've got some new features. So some of those new features that can help fight fraud are AI image analysis. So this is something that we'll be able to show you just a quick little piece on what that looks like. We also have a custom rules engine embedded into conveyance. So that means that you, the financial institution, you all have the ability to set your own custom rules inside of conveyance. So maybe you want to set a custom deposit limit rule, and you want to have your team be notified if there are, say, ATM deposits over a certain dollar amount. Conveyance will alert your team. Your team can jump into conveyance and perform your internal reviews, your standard like T-stamp method, essentially, through this cloud conveyance check imaging service. You can also set up custom item alerts. So when certain situations are met or certain types of transactions come into conveyance, specific types of alerts will be sent to one-to-many email addresses. Additionally, you can also view your X9 file, your cash letter, inside of conveyance. So when your team goes to log into conveyance and take action, maybe they're like doing a review that your item processor said, hey, we received this cash letter from you yesterday, and there was this thing with it that we're uncertain about. Can you clarify? Your team has the tools that they need to be able to review those X9s, those cash letters, from within conveyance without having to buy like additional third-party applications. And lastly, and the piece that's really being highlighted as part of this overall presentation is the new AFS integration. So like Tony just said, AFS consortium-based database that helps you identify fraud, duplicate checks, etc. So conveyance plays nicely with that. And we talk directly to AFS. And so let me show you what some of these things look like. So first off, when we talk about the AI image analysis within conveyance, what you can do inside of conveyance is when when a deposit is completed, and that deposit, say an ATM deposit, that deposit will be sent up to conveyance immediately, and it'll sit in conveyance for a period of time until your scheduled X9 creation time. In between that time of when conveyance receives the transaction to when the transaction is actually bundled into an X9 and sent to your item processor, your team has the ability to jump into conveyance and perform these types of reviews. One of the reviews that you can do is an AI image analysis review. So there's a little button on there that your team can click. And as you can see inside of this example screenshot here, you get kind of circles or squares around different elements of the checks. And so you can hover over those elements with your mouse, and our AI image analysis will give you a confidence rating of whatever that element is. So for example, maybe your team wants to compare the legal written a dollar amount of a check. AI will analyze the text that's in that field, and it'll give you a confidence rating based on, how confident are we that this was $4,000 check, for example. So they can compare legal versus courtesy amount. They could validate confidence along the maker line, signature, maker information, all of the different elements of the check. Within the custom rules portion of Conveyance, your team has the ability to build custom rules that Conveyance will say disposition items to a specific way, or perhaps even automatically reject items. So let me give you some examples of that. Maybe an example would be across your ATM fleet, you have a kind of a deposit limit rule that you want your team to review any deposited checks over, say, $500. So you can create this rule in Conveyance that will automatically disposition any deposited items over $500 to a needs review status, which would then trigger an alert to your team, so your team knows to come into Conveyance and do reviews on them. You can also set more tighter, more creative rules, like automatically rejecting items. So perhaps you all have a member or a customer that anytime that they make a deposited check that has this MICR line info on it, that it bounces every single time because it's from their old Bank of America account and that account's been closed, for example. You can create a rule within Conveyance that would automatically reject any items that came in that had that MICR combination that you created. Next, we talked about how we can view the X9 file from within our browser. So within Conveyance, rather than having to purchase or download a third-party application, we've built the ability for your team to be able to review your X9 cache letters right from within your browser. And this is really cool because, maybe you, the example I gave earlier, maybe you got a message from your item processor and they said, hey, there's this field and there's this value in that field that we have a problem with, or, can you verify something? Your team can actually look at the actual X9 file that was sent to your item processor and validate from the actual file that they're looking at on their side. So you could perform review, you could download these X9s if you decided to keep them, maybe in your retention, whatever it might be. So you can do all of that from within your browser. Now getting into the fun stuff, this touches on things that Tony was talking about around AFS. So we've built in some automatic and some manual handling for AFS TrueChecks from within Conveyance. So this can be handled a couple of different ways. The first way is your team would have the ability to jump into Conveyance and say they're reviewing an item. They would automatically see a recommendation from Conveyance for this specific item that you're reviewing. And so in the top half of the left screenshot here, you see a hold recommendation, and this says counterfeit alteration. So what that means is that this specific item that we're looking at has already gone through the AFS database via Conveyance, and you've gotten a recommendation back. So now your team can have an informed decision that they're going to make and say, okay, AFS is saying, hey, we should put a hold on this check, and then you can take other appropriate action that's needed. The second way that your team can interact with AFS through Conveyance is not on a manual basis, but on more of an automated basis. So I touched on how you can create custom rules within Conveyance. You can do that kind of looping in the AFS recommendations. So perhaps maybe there's an item that was deposited and we've got Conveyance configured to automatically send these items through AFS. And if AFS comes back with a hold recommendation or a reject recommendation, you can configure custom rules within Conveyance to automatically take that action, like rejecting an item. So if, say AFS's alert is saying, hey, don't accept this item, you can create a rule that says, hey, if AFS says don't accept this item, then reject it and do not include it in our cache letter. So there's like a couple of different ways that you can integrate AFS into your overall Conveyance workflow. So I think I'll go ahead and hand it off to Evan here next.
Awesome. Thanks, Barry. Let me go ahead and get my screen pulled up here.
While Evan's doing that too, I think just we know too, there's a lot of different ways and different technologies there. So like Barry mentioned, right? So if you have other solutions you're currently using today and would like to have an integration into Conveyance, just let us know, because we are wanting to continue to improve and add more and more integrations to Conveyance that are cloud native as well. So think about that in the back of your mind, and just know that, hey, if you have something and you wish, just let us know, because our hope is that we can continue to build upon that.
Awesome. So what you see on my screen here is going to be our TrueChecks portal. So this is really going to be that backbone behind what's feeding the information into Conveyance. So the most important takeaway here is going to be the data. So Tony alluded to it. TrueChecks is really that database of negative historical information. We have data coming in from over 3,500 different financial institutions, including our client base, partners, core processors, a number of different contributors to that database. So just because a financial institution is not directly contributing data to the TrueChecks database does not mean we don't have a wide variety of data on accounts at that institution. So within TrueChecks, we're able to query those checks based on the MICR information. So on my right-hand side of the screen here, you can see the TrueChecks search, and then the left-hand side is a little demo check. So let's say as that check is being queried, I'll go ahead and enter in all of that MICR information, starting off with the routing number. And we have a direct tie into the Fed for all US and Canadian-based routing numbers. So if a routing number comes through with a query and that routing number happens to be invalid, that can be a response that is coming through on that item. If I were to remove a digit, we do have Canadian-based routing numbers within our system as well. So I can see that's an 8-digit Canadian routing number, but that's not a valid Canadian routing number. This is kind of my first validation. I can see that that is an AFS Bank and Trust check. The stock indeed says AFS Bank and Trust. So there's no alarm bells going off quite yet. The next thing I'll go ahead and do is enter in the account number, check number, and the amount. And with that, I have all the necessary information to query that check. So these are the details that Conveyance is going to be sending via API for us to be able to return the responses directly within the Conveyance platform. With that, I have all the necessary information needed to query a check. So I'll go ahead and expand my browser and perform a search. Within TrueChecks, as that item is queried, we will respond an overall recommended action, like you saw within the example that Barry shared. So in this case, I can see the recommended action on this item is to deny that check. And down below that recommended action, we get the details into why we recommend you deny that check. So I can see here the results. In this case, we have details such as non-sufficient funds alerts. So in this case, this account has had an item returned in the last 30 days due to non-sufficient funds. We keep those NSF alerts on an account for 30 days, as that's typically when we find that an account either once again has funds or a more severe, more serious return has occurred, whether that account has been closed or something else of that manner. To the right-hand side of the NSF alerts, I can see there's duplicate query details. So within the TrueChecks platform, we have the ability to actually return a recommended action if that item has been queried by another institution running TrueChecks. So this is going to be different than the Fed return codes of duplicate presentment or duplicate, where that item has already been deposited and ultimately returned. This is allowing you to be notified if that item has actually just been queried at another institution. So not necessarily deposited or returned, just queried. In this case, I can see that this item with all of the matching details was actually already queried and accepted by another financial institution. So that right there is contributing to that deny recommendation, as someone has already deposited this item at another institution that is running TrueChecks. Down below, we have the ability to return account status information, as well as the details of the fraud risk alerts. So this fraud risk alerts is going to tell us the actual returns against that account within the TrueChecks database. If I were to expand that detail, I can get some of the detailed information into those specific returned items. Along with the returned items, we have the ability to pull in Advanced Fraud Solutions positive pay data. So we call this cross-institutional positive pay, where if another institution's business clients are taking advantage of our AFS positive pay platform, they can provide their issued check information, and if that's queried at, say, your institution, and it differs from what that business said they issued that check in, we have the ability to actually return that through TrueChecks. Additionally, down below, if I hit next, and you saw this within Barry's example as well, I can see the further details behind the recommended action for this item. So in this case, I can see also we have a tie-in to the Treasury service. So the item that I queried for the example was not a Treasury item, but we use this as an example to say that we do have that tie-in as well as the hookup to the CVS API to be able to return details on Treasury items, including the payee name. So in this case, I can see in this example, that item was returned due to forgery, but the payee name on the item did indeed match the payee name that the Treasury service issued that check to. Continuing to hit next, I can see further returned items against this account, all contributing to that recommended action of deny. So in this case, an item has been returned due to counterfeit alteration. There was a secret shopper scam, another counterfeit alteration, as well as a lottery winner. And in total, there have been 10 items returned against this account for a multitude of reasons, all contributing recommended actions. And in this case, based on all of the information available on this account, we recommend that you deny that item. So like I alluded to, really the key takeaway here is going to be the data. That's what's going to feed into Conveyance and allow you to configure that rule base, as well as just manually review those transactions directly within the portal. So with that, I'll go ahead and kick it back over.
Great. Now's the time to get those Q&A questions in. It looks like we have had 2 come in so far. Let's see, Tony, first one is, why is check fraud continuing to rise?
Yeah, that's the real challenge, right? We never thought, I don't think anybody thought in 2026, if you could ask someone 10 years ago in 2016, 10 years from now, we'll still be dealing with check fraud, everyone would have said no. But unfortunately, we are. I think some of the reasons for that is it's that analog format. It makes it easier to manipulate. There's things that have come along that we didn't have, or at least they weren't as prolific 10 years ago, with things like 3D printing, being able to fake things, being able to create ways to manipulate and modify things that we didn't have before. There's a big problem with mail theft. There's always been some mail theft, but I feel like it's gotten significantly worse. I saw one thing that it was a study of prospective postal worker applicants, and it was identified in this one study of it, nearly 2/3 of the applicants were part of a fraud ring. They were literally trying to get hired by the Postal Service just so they could be on the inside and steal mail. It's unbelievable stuff.
Crazy.
But I mean, that, and then you take, anytime there's economic strains, anytime we have any significant, forces going on in the world that affect the economy, whether it's inflation, whether it's war, whether it's other things in the past, banking crisis, from back in 2008, all those kinds of things, when the chips are down, right, people will do things that they maybe wouldn't do. And I think that causes some of the fraud to rise. And when they try to do that, what's the easiest fraud they can perpetuate? It's usually check fraud. So I think all of those factors play into it.
Appreciate the insight, Tony. Let's see, Barry, did you have anything to add to that, or should we get on to the next question?
I think Tony was pretty thorough in that answer. So yeah, on to the next question.
Perfect. We have one more in the chat, Tony. The next one is, what impact will AI have on fraud?
Well, the good news is it's going to completely solve it, is what I wish I could say. It's not going to be the case at all, unfortunately. It's going to be one of those where, no one really knows, but, certainly the stuff you read up on it, it's going to be, AI fighting AI. Like, we got to use it for good to stop the AI that's being used for bad. There's going to be things, I think I saw in the chat about business, like online account takeover, right? It's going to be a lot easier to do that kind of thing. I was doing a presentation recently, and one of the financial institutions in the audience, they shared a story about their mother being called by them and asking for money. Only the catch was they never called them. It was a voice clone. Someone had captured their voice, made a voice clone, called this guy's mother, acting like they were them, and it sounded like them. So it's getting scary what can be done. And that's just, we're kind of in the infancy of it. AI looks somewhat convincing now. A lot of the videos are getting really sophisticated, and this is the worst they're ever going to look. It's only going to get better, or in this case, worse, I guess, from here. So it's those things. It's deep fakes. It's really making it like turnkey. Like, imagine just being able to, at least to set up like a spoofed website, you'd have to have some sort of coding knowledge, some sort of programming background potentially to do it. Not just everybody could do it. AI is going to make it where literally anyone can do it. It'll be like turnkey, like you just buy it, and it's like a one-stop, shop, instant fraud, faked website that looks like someone's bank, that kind of thing. I think that's where we're headed with this stuff, and it's pretty terrifying. But like I said, we've got to find ways to use it for good, to stop, the bad actors. I'll leave you with one stat that I ran across, since I love stats. Clearly, not a lot of stats in here. It was projected by, this was Juniper Research, projects that by 2030, the fraud losses just related to AI, so not accounting for anything else, just strictly AI related fraud losses, they're estimating it at 60 billion. And 2030 is 4 years away. So, I mean,
Yeah.
We're going from AI was, something we heard about in sci-fi movies to, something we're dealing with every day. So it's pretty crazy. But unfortunately, yeah, the impact it's going to have is going to be severe, and it's not going to be pretty, I don't think.
Appreciate that
Hopefully
insight, Tony.
It's a two-way street, right, Tony, where there's AI to help prevent it, like we're seeing.
Exactly, right.
But on the same point, yeah, you're going to have AI causing more and more at the same front. So it's going to be a continuous battle between the two of them to figure out how to stop it.
Well, we saw that was the solution in Terminator 2, right? You had to have the other Terminator fight the other, let them fight it out, right? That's how we have to do it.
The name of the new product, the Check Terminator.
There you go. Might be onto something. Patent that real quick.
Yeah.
We do have another question come in from Dana here. It says, can you please clarify where the ATM check deposit flow, the checks from both the conveyance side with the rules engine and AI analysis and TrueChecks are happening? In an ideal world, we would like the opportunity to deny the check deposit before the member has completed the ATM session. Dana, I believe you and I have chatted about this in the past, but with tradition, like within the ATM software, right? The check deposit flow, it goes through, it pockets that check, it does an initial car log recognition, and then it deposits that check. Once that check has been, gone into the safe, that's when the files are transmitted up to conveyance, and then any subsequent review is done. So while the ATM has a car log recognition, we can use AI analysis within conveyance to do a secondary look at car log just to be confident that it is what it says it was. And then in addition, we'll do that rules engine to kind of flag against any bigger item. And that way you still have those partial funds available for maybe items that you just want to do a longer hold on, and you can tailor it to exactly what you want to do there. But as far as like an integration directly in to before that check gets deposited, that's not something that's out there today. It's all after the fact, and it just depends on what an institution wants to make available prior to, actually collecting on those funds. So it's a little bit convoluted, and it's hard to wrap a brain around a little bit. But if you'd like, we could always do a demo tailored to your institution and go through that more granular.
Yeah, thanks, Alyssa. That makes sense. Does your team cook in AFS? Do you see that on the horizon where these tools can be integrated prior to the pocketing of the checks? So, yeah.
I think so.
Yeah,
I don't know how far
perfect
out
world.
it will be, but it's definitely something that a lot of people are asking for. So I think it's on the horizon. I just don't know how far out.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair. Thank you.
It's going to have to be an NCR thing.
Yeah, it's going to
And
require the manufacturers directly to get involved and the push to come from inside the house. So it'll take some time, but it's definitely a demand out there.
Well, you got to be able to make the speed fast enough so the members or customers aren't sitting there waiting for the checks to come in, if their transaction not taking so long, right?
And then there's bandwidth concerns and those rural ATMs, they can't handle going out and back a bunch. So there's a lot of considerations there, but one day.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think to wrap up for today, we have one big announcement on top of this. So for attending the webinar, for those that don't have Conveyance today or AFS, we are offering a 25% off option for attending today. So if you'd like to follow up with us, or we'll have our sales reps reach out to everyone that's joined here too, just to follow up with a follow-up meeting, we're happy to kind of do that. And then I think from there, Jesh and his team can kind of talk through more logistical details on what's involved to get something like this and set up and installed. We can also kind of do a custom demo for you, actually show you what the system looks like in a live environment, and show you actually from the time of deposits made all the way through this conveyance and the AFS solution and back to you guys too. So happy to help follow the conversation up on a more specific one-on-one nature for anyone here that's been able to join us today.
Hey, Scott, any additional discount if Duke wins?
If Duke wins, you get it for free. No,
Oh, wow, there you go.
I'm just
Everybody starts rooting for Duke.
If Duke wins, I will jump on the call with you and help you with it. Just kidding. That's like that. We need good reasons, not bad reasons. No deterrence here.
Dana's
Cool.
rooting for Duke now.
I do see Jacqueline had a question about how this can be applied and help organizations with ITMs. So I don't know if Cook, you want to jump in there first, or if I can also step in there.
Evan, I can maybe take that one. Yeah. Okay. So for those of you who are ITM users, AFS is awesome and does also have an ITM integration. It gets put in on your server. So whether that server is hosted here with CSG or whether that server is on-prem, it's like a plugin ultimately that gets done. You got to have, both for conveyance and the ITM rails, it would be like two separate, Tony, Evan, I don't, you call them modules, maybe?
Yeah, it's really just an integration within the TrueChecks.
So it's
or ITM for TrueChecks.
Yeah, totally. So it's a TrueChecks integration ultimately, both on the conveyance side and then on the ITM side. They are separate, but CSG we can help have those conversations, help implement that. And for those tellers, what happens is ultimately check deposit is done through an ITM session, through a teller session, and the teller will get a notification as that check is deposited, and they're able to run that through the AFS database, just like what you saw on the conveyance side. So it's pretty awesome.
One thing I'll add there, Josh, is that they can be layered on top of each other. So you can have both. You can have both your ITM integration. So your tellers get that real-time alert as those checks are being deposited within a session. They can take appropriate action, just a quick notification to do maybe an extended hold or return that check. And then subsequently within conveyance, you can also have the conveyance integration. So that's going to be a secondary review that you can put those business rules on and perform some, automatic checks against and take action before that cash letter ever goes out to the Fed, which is huge to be able to catch things as soon as possible there.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Good stuff. All right. Well, again, appreciate everyone joining us today. It's good to see you all. Like I said, we'll be in touch. Again, I would highly recommend if you'd like to have a one-on-one conversation, we're more than happy to schedule a demo with you and show you what it looks like and really talk through how this can impact you specifically, and even talk through some real-time situations that you might be dealing with from any fraud you're seeing within your organization. I'm happy to talk through it and see what we can do to help you out. But other than that, yes, go Duke, and thank you for joining us today. And if Gonzaga wins or Arizona wins, that's fine too, I suppose.
Go Zags.
All righty. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the day. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Cheers.
everyone.
Thank you.